Welcome to this long-awaited Asian Women Leaders Forum. This is sponsored by BU Pardee School of Global Studies, Center for the Center for the Study of Asia, and CAS. Together, we are organizing this. And some of you might know, for our center, each year we choose one theme to highlight. And it seems to me it's high time that we highlight the role of Asian women leaders in Asian society. In the last 20 years, we know that the high-profile women leaders from grassroots has risen in all societies in Asia, in Burma, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Thailand, and in all places of society. So we decided to highlight the women leaders' contribution. We are very, very happy and very, very honored to have 4 of these leaders among us. They have flew from different places from Asia to come to us today. And in particular, we want to honor them in the field of political, economic life, the field of art and culture, but more importantly, their contribution in the struggle for gender equality, achievement in social justice, policy making, and social activism through art and culture. I would like to shortly introduce our 4 leaders that we are so absolutely honored to have. Urvashi Butalia. I tried to memorize these names the whole night, you know. Urvashi Butalia is one of the forerunners of women rights in India. She is the co-founder of women publishing houses in 2 of them in India. She is a formative force in publishing in the world, and she's an activist in the women's movement in India. She is a writer, author of academic as well as cultural subjects. Her book that has won her many prizes, and I actually was going through this and very impressive. Partition, The Other Side of Silence, Voices from Partition of India, which won her many prizes, is an oral history of women, of children, of the ordinary people, what they have gone through this partition. And in that way, she has shaped our understanding of political agency and the ordinary, gave voices to the ordinary people. We are also honored to have from Korea, Professor Cho. She can be considered the mother of feminism in South Korea. She is the voice of women's rights. She is a social activist. She told me today that the laws has not changed yet, but to honor the mother's last name as much as the father's last name. Although it seems like a procedure question, of course, behind that is the rights of women. She is an activist. I went on YouTube and saw this huge speech she gave in English. She talks to young people about the rights, gender, young. She also organized special schools to foster new values in South Korea. So we welcome her. Hiroko Kikuchi is an artist, yes. But she's not just an artist, She is an artist that is committed to community building. She do not just have art shows in the community, but she use art to formulate communities, to give communities identity. She is a BU graduate in our, not art and sciences, but in fine arts. But she returned to Japan after the earthquake of Tohoku and used her art to organize the community sense of identity and gave people a sense of coherence. Her traces of art and organization goes from Boston to Japan to Washington to, is that Seattle also? No, you only the East Coast. Anyway, we are very, very happy to have a artist, community builder among us today. Last but not least, my very dear friend, Lung Yingtai. Lung Yingtai is probably the most famous essayist and writer in the Chinese language world. Many people have read her and been influenced by her. She's a professor at Hong Kong University at the moment, and she was the first cultural minister in Taiwan. I'm hoping maybe today she will talk a little bit about this. So from 文化人, from a cultural writer, conscience of the people, she became part of the establishment, part of policy making. And that transition I find actually admirable as a service to the community, but also extremely challenging. She never gave up being the public intellectual. She spoke up, especially on two-states relations. She exercised culture as the way of communication instead of branding weapons and harsh words. And in her writing, when I first encountered her, probably her most famous book is Wildfire, 野火集, right? She talked about the environment. She talked about human rights. So that was under martial law. So we are very, very happy and very lucky to have her today. Our panel today will be moderated by our very excellent Pardee School Dean, Adil Najam. Let's welcome him. But before we start our discussion, I would like our Dean of Humanities, Ann Carr, to say a few words welcoming our guests. Some of you might not know Ann Carr so well, and I don't know her so well, but we learned to know her. She is our new Dean of Humanities. The reason we invited her is not only because she is a dynamic dean and a female, but we invited her due to primarily the study she has been devoting. Our Dean Carr has been writing on the question of the focus of her research on oppression, on economic inequality, on gender issues and questions. And her books are published by Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press. And in some ways, she is our fifth leader in this group, that she's also making a huge contribution to raise the consciousness of very important issues of our time. So we welcome Dean Carr.
Thank you, Kathy. On behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I am actually the dean also of the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the mathematical and computational sciences. They would hate it if I forgot to mention them as well. I'm very pleased and happy to welcome you to Boston University. So I know you've come from a long ways. Actually, one of you is a BU graduate. Those of you who haven't been here before, I hope you have the opportunity to see our campus and most of all our city, which is a really beautiful city. And I'm very privileged to be able to live here and to be the Dean of Arts and Sciences. Since the weather is forecast to be at various times windy, rainy, sunny, and perhaps even snowy, you'll get to see everything that New England weather has to offer, I think, this weekend. But I'm very pleased and honored to be asked to give a few words to frame this first panel today. As Kathy said, my work has been in economic and political philosophy, specifically focusing on oppression and gender inequality. So I have a special interest in your topic, but it's also, of course, extremely important for any engaged and knowledgeable citizen of the world. When we think about the world's women in the context of studying oppression and inequality, naturally the question arises, have we made any progress in reducing oppression? And if so, in what ways? And where do we have yet to go? Well, of course, that's too big a topic to take up, and I'm not going to give very long remarks, but let me just say a few things as a philosopher who might be useful, if she's useful at all, for offering some foundational definitions and distinctions. And so first of all, what do I mean by oppression? I take this term to name a social group-based phenomenon in which there's a group that's harmed by some social norm or practice. There's at least one other social group that's benefited by that norm or practice, and it is coercive or somehow unavoidable. So I hold the somewhat controversial view that gender is by nature oppressive because it's constructed as a hierarchy. But perhaps convincing you of that will take us too far afield. So just note for me that the concept of women's leadership is troubled from the very beginning. Now, it's worth discussing why women are in fact oppressed as women. I take it that inequality is not the same as oppression. So the mere fact that there are unequal lives or different lives and outcomes for women and men does not show that women are oppressed. Difference is often to be celebrated and a source of creativity, of inspiration and innovation. But women are still unequal to men around the world in ways that do harm women and benefit men. For example, women are far more subject to gender-based violence and discrimination in work and family production and reproduction. Of course, each woman belongs to other social groups which have more or less privilege, and this means that it is hard to compare women and men across the many sources of group identity that they have. But taking men and women who share other social group status, in almost every case, women are harmed by their membership in the group women, while men are advantaged by their membership in the group men. Still, yes, of course, we've made progress in reducing these kinds of harms. Inequality in wages between the sexes is lower than it was in earlier generations in most places in the world, and in some places it has virtually disappeared. Women's lives are markedly better almost everywhere in terms of life expectancy, literacy, and higher education. Their fertility rate is lower, often because women have much more control over their reproductive lives. And infant mortality has been reduced, so we lose our children less often. These are all good things and signs of progress. And the subject of this conference, women's leadership, is perhaps the most remarkable advance to celebrate. Women are leading throughout the world in many ways and on many levels. No longer only in women's occupations or traditional roles, but in politics, law, finance, and world affairs. And one great sign of this is the presence of women heads of state in Asia, Europe, Africa, New Zealand. And this reflection about women heads of state at this time of the election cycle here begs the question, why not the US? Why has there still not been a woman president of the United States? Now, I'm not a political scientist, and I cannot say that I even follow politics as religiously as many lay people do. I have a hard time viewing it like a fan in a sporting event where it's a spectacle to cheer or boo about. Yet, in the US, that is how we seem to enjoy our politics. I would rather deliberate about conceptions of political legitimacy that each candidate's platform might entail. But I find that changes from day to day with the rhetorical strategies they employ and the crowds that they address. So for me, it's not fun being a political philosopher during election season. Stepping back, though, and looking at this from my perspective as a political philosopher of oppression, I have a few thoughts about why the US has not had a woman president, although I wonder why these forces have not applied in the many places in Asia where there have been women heads of state. Now, in my analysis of oppression, I have argued that one of the reasons that oppression endures through generations is because the oppressed find it difficult to create solidarity across their group. Instead of joining together to fight off oppression, the oppressed tend to compete with each other in ways that push the others down in order to get ahead as individuals or in subgroups within the oppressed group. Solidarity for women, as Simone de Beauvoir noted in the last century, is difficult because women are members of families and their intimate partners are often men. It is also difficult because they are members of other social groups that also supply them with sources of identity and competing claims. So we see women with various kinds of privilege who gain individual power through distancing themselves from those women who do not share that kind of privilege. Have the particular women, heads of state in Asia, pursued this strategy? Even if they have, perhaps that has been good for women as a group in those countries. I'm not sure. Or perhaps it has been even more harmful to other oppressed groups. I dare say, though, that for this woman, they are beacons of hope, that someday I might also live in a country where a woman is, or at least has once been, the head of state. So I'm excited to hear the speakers today illuminate these and many other themes about women's leadership. I'll be listening especially for what we can learn from women's leaders in Asia that we can apply on these shores. So now I give you Adil Najam.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dean Card. Thank you very much, Kathy Ye. Thank you especially, Dean Card, for having set for us a stage and a set of questions which I hope will frame not only our discussion this evening, but also our extended discussion tomorrow as we have the 4 workshops that will be led by our 4 guests. Let me also thank Professor Ye for her leadership herself in organizing this conference, in the management of the Center for Study of Asia, and in bringing together such a vibrant group of people, but also a topic that's really important and really central to the ethos of the Pardee School. We bring together here an understanding of the regions of the world, an understanding of place by people who are in place, people who come from those regions. We bring together an understanding of the humanities, of culture, of art, but also of the political environment that Dean Cutt talked about. And that's really what the school is trying to do in an honest way, to bring these disciplines to talk to each other, not simply to tolerate each other, but to produce knowledge that reflects the richness that we bring from each of our various disciplinary backgrounds. I should note that as we speak about women leaders today at another part of the campus, on another Pardee School event, people are talking about who sells arms to Asia. And I would posit to you that those are not two unrelated topics. And that's the world that we want to talk about. I will not go into an extended introduction of our guests, even though they deserve it very much, but I do urge you to not only read what's in the brochure there and what Professor Ye already mentioned, but the very varied and very rich experiences that our four guests bring here. Now, Kathy Ye pointed out that Dean Card was here not only because of her work, but also because she was a woman. I obviously am not. So I'm obviously not here because if it's Asian women leaders. I'm obviously not here for the woman card. I'm obviously not here for the leader card. I'm probably here for being Asian on another part of Asia. But I feel, having struggled all my life, and including now on urging people that no panel should be solitary gender. And usually that ends up in a solitary female being put on a panel. It is actually heartening to be the token male, to bring my gender into the conversation, which I hope has some relevance. The question that we want to ponder upon today, really framed by Ankad, if I can restate it in a way, and we want to have a conversation. We're not going to have a lecture here. We're going to have a conversation between us and then between you and us. But the meta question to me is, what does it mean to be an Asian woman leader? What does it mean to be a woman who's a leader in Asia? And what does it mean for Asia to have leaders who are women? Because society changes itself. And then to add to that, the question that Dean pointed out, what does that mean for the world? Because here is a very large part of the world which has a very varied experience in very varied fields. And that's really my only question, and I'll keep posing it in different ways as we go on. And maybe I can start the conversation with Urvashi and sort of be provocative, if nothing else. We know you are a leader, but when did you know you were a leader? And I really asked that to ponder on that question. What does it mean to be a leader? Because it's not simply a designation or a post. When did you know that you were leading something in society?
Actually, I was a little surprised when you invited me because I don't think of myself as a leader. So I thought leader, me. But, to take your question seriously, I don't have a straightforward answer to that. Where I come from, I cut my political teeth in the women's movement in India. I set up a women's publishing house. I didn't set it up with any notion of being a leader, but basically just filling a gap that existed, and that no man that I worked with or that I knew seemed to even begin to understand. So it's not as if they were in opposition or they were obstacles, but they simply didn't enter their imagination. And so I thought, okay, I was young and foolish and adventurous, and I thought, well, I'll do it myself. But of course, somewhere along the way, when you take a step like that, you do realize that whether or not your politics, and in this case feminist politics, allows you to understand the concept of individual leadership, and feminism really works against that totally, right? You do have to take the responsibility of being some kind of leader. I'm not a leader in the sense that you are, because I've never walked into politics or anything like that. But at some stage, I did realize that I have a responsibility for the people that work with me, the subject I have chosen to work on, the ramifications of that subject in the wider world. and therefore,
If I can
yeah.
push and maybe sort of give you a peek into sort of Kathy's conversation, at least with me when we were talking about you. When someone chooses to set up a publishing house that is not just a women-led publishing house in that the person leading it happens to be a woman, but which has an agenda of leading society in a different direction, that's where we see that leadership. But I wanted to throw that back at you, that did you see that consciously? Was it an act that I'm going to change society through this act, no matter in how small a way? Or was it a calling that I just need to do this myself? Or was it simply a vocation?
I think it was a very clear desire to make a change in society by creating a knowledge base about women, and by therefore foregrounding women's lives, their contribution to society. So there's no question in my mind that it was not that kind of, within quotes, missionary zeal to change society. Was it a calling? Yes, I think so. I think it was a calling. It's never been a mere vocation. It's really been something to which I think my life is totally committed. And today, 32 years along the line, I still think there is a great deal to be done. And I think that we have only just started to scratch the edge of, there's so much more to be done. So I think that that's really what it was.
We shall come back to this question of, when do we know that what the change we want is having an impact, and we then raise the bar on the change we want, because that's the constant process of progress. But I wanted to come to Professor Cho maybe with the same question in whatever way, because really the question is, what is women leadership in a society? And in reflecting on your own journey, how would you reflect on that?
As you said, I have never kind of think about myself as a leader. I just want to be on my own. I don't want somebody order me to do this and that. So I really want to do what I want and fulfill what I believe. And I guess after I wrote a couple of books, and when it became all those college students have been reading it. That's about post-colonial. It's a feminist book, but at the same time, I was saying that just don't read a book as a text. It's a text for your own life, and you write your own text, that kind of book. So it gets very popular in 1990s, and I felt that I'm a very influential person, meaning that I'm a very responsible person. And then, after the 1997 Asian financial crisis, I was kind of panicked about all this terrible situation and kind of feel real responsibility. So I founded alternative school in Korea. And through that, I want to at least do something for what I have been saying. And after this Fukushima, I again felt so terrible, and people start talking about, and recently we have such a difficulty of that the young people really don't have a job. So in Korea, the young people call Korea Hell Joseon, means Joseon is kind of last dynasty. So it's Korea is really country of a kind of feudal, kind of not open society, and young people call themselves as give up generation. 3 means that first you have to give up dating because you don't have money, and second you have to give up marriage, even if you have a dating, you don't have money to get married. And thirdly, you have to give up having children.
Right.
And then they add 2 more things. So one is housing, and second one is human relationship. And then they add two more things. Guess what? So one is dream, and then the seventh one is hope. So it's, in a way, it's getting very closer to the Japanese case, right? So young people are really, I just have this book, Precarious Youth of Japan, or Precarious Future. So that, in that situation, I feel, I kind of feel really terrible, and I don't know what to do about this, and I really don't want to be the leader, right? But I should do something. So last time we had a conference at Asian Studies at the Seattle, and there people were in Japan, actually Japanese scholars were talking about men and women in Japan, and they say still women are frustrated, but men are scared. So in this kind of situation, I cannot really say women are oppressed, right? And we cannot really talk about gender equality. Something totally different messages should come from us feminists. And that's why I'm here.
This is wonderful, and I take especially your point about with influence comes responsibility. And then later in the conversation, I want to come to this thing that all across Asia, really from the Arab fringe of Asia to Japan and between, you have amazingly influential women who assume leadership. But it is difficult sometimes to equate that with the societal transformation at the same rate. So if I think of the political world, we've had women prime minister in Bandaranaike in Sri Lanka, going back to the 70s, Indira Gandhi in India, Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan. In Iran, one of our colleagues works on this, and more than a dozen women standing for election in the current Iran. And being able to actually make an inroad. Didn't win, but so on and so forth. But the question is also of the societal transformation, that to assume a leadership position as opposed to be able to lead a society into a different sphere. And I just raised that at this point because we want to come back. But before I do that, I did want to finish this round of sort of personalizing our experience with going to Hiroko and sort of asking you the same question, but also with a particular emphasis on the role of the arts and humanities in terms of A, women assuming leadership, and B, in women asserting leadership in Asian societies. What has been your experience?
That's a big question. So I don't know if I can answer all that question, but
whatever.
So but thanks for having me, by the way. And then same thing as she was saying. Then I just never really considered myself as a leader per se, but something that I really believe in. Then I'll tell you what it is. And then so I really didn't have the privilege of saying no to a lot of things. Just being here from outside of the country that I grew up, and just really just kind of looking very closely about what I need to do, and then to get to what I want, I just have to say yes to a lot of things. So I just kind of, I have a habit of saying yes, and then, but that's kind of got to where I am, I think. And I think it kind of sounds simple, but what affirmed me was when, so I studied performance art in college, and then when I actually sort of starting about Yoko Ono's work, and then there's a piece called Ladder Piece, and another word is Yes Piece, where it's done in 1964 when there is a ladder, and then you just go up to the ladder, and then there is a magnifying glass on the top, and suspended through it, and then you look through it, and there is a word yes. And that was a time when there's a lot of social and movement is happening, and the activism was so much about no to this and no to that. But to be responsible for who you are as a person, even as a woman, or it's really all about what you can say yes to.
In my naivety, can I push on that?
Yeah.
When you say you didn't have the luxury of saying no, is it because you felt pressured to say did you find that as a constraint, or were you feeling so because you felt responsible to say yes because there was no one else who could perform that role for that society?
I guess it might have come from more of a fear of not being asked again, not being included. And that was probably sort of how I felt, and sometimes how I feel, even returning to Japan. And then just kind of, I don't necessarily want it to be in the middle of the circle per se, and I've always been a sort of outer skirt of it, to be honest. But just to be able to communicate into the center of what's happening, I need to have a pipeline. And I just always want to have some, even with a tiny, tiny stroll, I just wanted to make sure there is something comes across here and there. It's like communication, I guess. And then I sort of thrive for that. And it's just kind of going back to why art. Part is sort of, okay, it kind of sounds sort of emotional in a way, but really sort of like, art really saved me in a way that I didn't have to say, I didn't have to speak English sometimes. And then so the literal language was very hard for a while. So I just have to kind of somehow, I have something that I wanted to say, but I just didn't know how to say it. So I have to really develop the different kinds of language, which happen to be the art. And now it's about art as an idea. And then somehow that really has led to art as a tool to really look into what's happening in the society or what's happening around my friends and community. So it's really shifting it as something that was very personal to something that I know this can actually work to change something or at least influence something. And then
that is wonderful. And again, sort of, I want to continue the conversation. I take also from that one very interesting insight, at least for me, that if you are the first, if you take leadership as the first one in a group to do something, it puts this influence, brings responsibility, but it also brings this dimension of that I'm doing it for larger than myself, right? And for any group that may be marginalized or oppressed or minority or whatever, that this notion, I see this in my own society of being the first one to have done X. And in things that there are in another reference group, thousands who do it every day. But the first one to do that is a measure of achievement, but B, a measure of responsibility, because now on your shoulders is I'm going to open door for all these, and that must be a heavy responsibility, right? So and then I say that in by way of coming to Lung Yingtai, who as Kathy Ye pointed out, you showed leadership in your work, in your intellectual contribution, and then choose to go into the realms of policy and assert that leadership there, and in an area of culture. How do you reflect on that experience in terms of your own journey as well as that of your society?
Well, there are three focuses here today: women, leader, Asia. I never, when I write or even when I make policies, I never think of myself that I'm a woman. This consciousness is just not there. I just work, I write, I make policies. Then if you ask me, but do you have a woman's awareness? Do you have this feminist idea? I would say, well, for a long, long time, I did not. Because my generation, we grew up on romances where you marry the first man you fall in love with, and you have sex only after you are properly married. So that's my generation. So, we would think, once you are married, you belong to your husband. That's my generation. So I did not have that awareness, but gradually it came, and it came to me very, very late. You know, sometimes I feel embarrassed to tell people when it was the kind of first time I realized that. I was already 30 when I became assistant professor. I left the United States and I went back. And there was one funny occasion, as a lot of professors like in this room today. And for example, Dr. Wagner would introduce us. We were male professors and female professors standing in a circle. And he would say, this is Dr. So-and-so, and that is Dr. So-and-so, and that is Dr. So-and-so. And me being the only woman professor then, this is Miss So-and-so. You know? And I thought, oh. Well, it means I am pretty and young or what. So that was, I just went back to Taiwan. I thought, something's not right, you know. But on a more serious note, you begin to think about how you grew up. I remember my mom. My mother is a very, very important figure. She was born in 1925, and her generation are those who fled the war and communists in 1949. So they were overnight uprooted from their comfortable environment, and all of a sudden discovered they ended up in an island which they never heard of, and people on the street speak a language that they don't understand one word, and they try to make ends meet and raise children. When I was 14, so my family was very poor. I had 3 brothers. I was the only daughter, and that's part of the reason why I never realized that I'm a woman, because I grew up with boys. When I was 14, a major decision had to be made. Because when we are 15, we finish middle high school. You have to decide you go to high school or you go to vocational school and become a primary school teacher. If you go to the vocational teacher's school, it's paid by the state. For poor families, you go there. The third choice in my village is you go to work in the factories. And all the girls of my age in the village, they are sent to the factories where they begin to make money. And the money you make, your parents will buy the gold bracelet for you. 1 and the 2nd and the 3rd and 4th, it goes up, and then it's time for you to get married. So that's the third choice. We were so poor. I wanted to go to high school, meaning that you would go up to college. But we were too poor, so my father insisted that I'm not going to send you to the factory, but you go to the teacher's college because everything is fine. I told my mother, no, I want to go to college. And she is the woman who told my father to shut up, that no matter how poor we are, if she's going to the college, then she is going. So I, without any awareness, but later on, it dawned on me that this woman was fighting for her family, for a living, and she had this mind seeing what is the future for a child who is going to be a woman. So I have a huge respect for my mother's generation.
This is absolutely spectacular. Can I push you on this and then also open it on this? That this wonderful point that you pointed out, that as a minister you are making the best decision, and it's not a woman's decision. No one says no one says Ernest Hemingway was a male author. He was a writer, right? But were there instances where, as you put it, if I remember right, a woman's sensibility led you to outcomes that would have been different or may not have been highlighted had you not come from the experience you come from of being a woman?
Examples are more interesting. My ministry has, at large, we have 2,000 employees with the Ministry of Culture. But the ministry per se itself has about immediately under me, we had about 450 staff members. And you know, it's government, and therefore you have rankings, and you work your life's time in order to get nice ranking. We have Taiwanese officials here. Nice ranking is the critical threshold, and most of the civil servants never go beyond ninth. Many times I had some experience. When I offer promotions to my staff members, 12th, ranking 12, which is very, very high.
So high is better, 9 is the threshold.
9 is the threshold, and the higher you go, the number is higher, then the ranking's higher. Number 12 is the top. Higher than 12 is already a political appointee. Okay, I remember, I couldn't believe it. I offered a very capable woman, and I had asked her to come to my office, and I said, I want to make you deputy director of the conservation, historical sites. And she showed appreciation, and finally she turned me down. And the reason she cited was, well, I offer incense for the family altar every morning. But if I take this position, I have to move to another city, and I cannot take care of the family altar anymore. So I'm not going to do it. That's one example because of this reason. And another one, typically, again, is a very high position to this very capable woman, and she did not take it either. The reason being, she has to take care of her husband's parents. So I have had so many experiences where the women would turn down a big promotion. I have never experienced that with men. And examples like this just tells you that personally, when I work with my colleagues in the cabinet, when I work with the prime minister or with the president, there's no gender. But we should not be blind to this fact. For example, in my ministry, altogether 60% are women. But when you look at the number above 9, the critical threshold, it's down to 37. And with the cabinet members, the women, the percentage of women in our cabinet is only 13% are women.
That is true in this country in many areas where an organization can report a fairly robust number of gender balance, except if you look at the board, it suddenly becomes a lot of black suits. On the black suits, I should note, I'm the one wearing yellow, and I'm glad for your red jacket, because we noted this morning that all our guests were wearing black. So
I did on purpose.
I am not, thank you. I'm not going to read into that, but I'm sure one of you is going to explain to me why that is so. But I wanted to throw this question to the others. This really important question of when you are in a leadership position, whether it is a post or a position in society, do you think of yourself as a woman leader? And in fact, also and I hope I'm not treading on, so I ask this in all naivety, is it unfair for us, males and others in society, to look at you as women leaders as opposed to leaders who happen to be women, right?
Yeah, when I started feminist movement in the 1980s, and we were really fierce, and we were saying there is no sex difference, no gender difference, and we changed the family law. We had this house head system, and we changed it, and we even were successful in making Ministry of Gender Equality. And now we are, then now we are saying there is such a gender difference, right? There is so much of gender difference, and anywhere I go, I found there's such a different in way of dealing or handling the problems. Maybe I sound sexist, but somehow in Korea, people don't discuss in order to solve a problem. Whenever I go, there is mostly men, and they don't really know how to discuss and openly talk about the problems or how you feel about the problem. Actually, whatever you know is your personal knowledge, right? So you have to really speak out, and you have to really show yourself, not only just the information. So it should be more communicative. We call it communicative rationality, not instrumental rationality, according to the Habermas. So we should be more speaking and understanding in terms of communicative rationality, not just just go into the conclusion and get into that solution. But somehow in Korea, they tend to be so uptight, and they really think we don't have time, so we have to get a conclusion. What's the point? They keep saying it. So I really see there is such a big difference in handling the things.
Yeah. Urvashi, on this, and I want to very soon open up because really we want a conversation in the room, but I had mentioned earlier this, it's not a dilemma, but it's an interesting question that Anne Card raised in a certain way and I raised in a certain way, that we've had these leaders actually even historically, and you come from a place, whether it is Razia Sultana back in history, a very powerful woman leader going back, or whether it is Indira Gandhi or Bandra Naike or Bangladesh, where essentially you can't have a male prime minister, at least in the next many years. Every party is led by it's going to be between these two women. And yet, these are not coming from the region societies where I think we would say, okay, battle over, right? I started my life way back as a journalist, and one of my prides was I was assigned to report on the campaign of Benazir Bhutto, who then became the first female prime minister in Pakistan. But the interesting thing, which I didn't realize until I then came here as a student, was that being a woman wasn't really much of an election issue. Right? And I've struggled with that. It wasn't talked about the way Hillary Clinton was. In retrospect, partly because it was too chauvinistic to even point out. Right? The male pride didn't allow for it. And if I can be fair, and I want to throw the question at you, because her resume did have a male coffin, as in her father, as in also with Bandra Naike or with Sina Wajid or Indira Gandhi. So, longish question, short end is, what does this fact that we can get women at very high positions and society doesn't blink an eye, and the fact that yet society cannot by any reasonable measure be called to have made the transition, say about our societies in Asia?
Yeah, I think it says actually quite a lot, and I'll respond to that, but I want to come back to your other question that you were posing about, do we think of ourselves as women leaders also? But I think that if you look at all the leaders in South Asia, they all come from very privileged political families. So I think that's one thing that provides an entry. There is no route for poor women or marginalized women to make it to the top in politics. When they do, as in the case of Mayawati in India, because she was a Dalit, because she was of the lowest of the low in caste terms, she was easily marginalized. Can
you say just a bit about Mayawati, because not everyone would?
So Mayawati was the...
Because this is a very fascinating story.
Yeah. She comes from the Dalit, or the untouchable castes in India, and she was elected to head the largest and most important political state in India called Uttar Pradesh. And during her tenure, she was accused of excessive corruption, which was not an allegation that was untrue, but it is true for all politicians, so in a sense. But also one of the things that she did was to visibly transform the physical landscape of the state that she ruled by putting in place symbols of the lower castes, leaders and leaders and various things surrounding the leaders. And she was also very open about her relationship with a political leader. And she used the phrase, which is very difficult to translate, but tumhari hoon, chamari hoon, whatever. She used her caste and her singleness as a badge of courage. And that didn't really go down very well with people, and she was completely marginalized, and she's now completely out of power. And it is not going to be easy for her to regain that power, despite the fact that she does have a political presence. But that's the kind of thing that would never have happened to Indira Gandhi or to Benazir Bhutto, or they would never have been marginalized in the same sort of way. So I think that's one is that the political family is the root for power, and that's the same for men and women in our countries, I think. The second is that in imperfect democracies, however imperfect they are, there is a way in which you can access power. Family may be the root, or there may be other ways, and you can make it to the top, and gender does not often matter in that, but it's the isolated case, it's not the norm.
Just to throw in, did Indira Gandhi, Prime Minister of India, long time, very powerful, matter to women in India? Even if she came from that family?
Okay. So she mattered to women in India, and as many leaders do, in terms of the iconic value of possessing the topmost post, let's say. We had a female president also who didn't matter. She was completely useless. So,
but it's a very ceremonial post in the president's defense.
But she could have actually said things which, not even necessarily about women, but she could have made her presence felt.
But
she didn't.
Again, sorry to cut in, but in the way that Lung Yingtai pointed out, that her sensibility as a woman impacted her decisions in that sort of way.
Not at all. None of our leaders in South Asia has that happened. They've all been too preoccupied with competing with the men in, what you were saying earlier. So I think there's that. Although this does not hold true, for example, in business families, it does not hold true in India in the banking sector, where all the top honchos are women who have risen from the bottom to the top. Every single big bank in India is headed by a woman.
So when you say it doesn't matter to women, or it doesn't matter whether they're male or women because they're going to...
What I mean is that women in politics did not, they had an iconic value, but they did nothing for women. Women in banking, in the corporate world, they do have an iconic value, and they do try to transform the landscape for women in some ways, which is, I think, quite important. And I do want to go back quickly to your question. I don't want to monopolize the thing. Do we think of ourselves as women leaders? I definitely think of myself as a woman leading something, whatever. To me, that is a matter of pride. It affects how I function in every way, whether in organizing a panel, whether in the relations with my colleagues, whether in the way I look at the workplace as a feminist workplace, my male colleagues, my female colleagues, whether in the way that I sit on a number of high-powered committees which are usually headed by men, and my presence there means more and more women enter there, more and more women from marginalized communities enter there. The way of talking changes, and black suits are out, even though I'm in black myself. I think women and the color they bring to a workplace transforms that workplace. But also my being a woman leader means that I deal with men differently. So I deal with men in a gender sensitive, I hope a gender inclusive manner. Does it matter to me how you think of us as women leaders? Yes and no. I think if you think of us as women leaders with respect, that's pretty damn wonderful. If you don't, I don't really care. That's...
I wanted to come to Hiroko, but Professor Cho was nodding so vigorously when you were talking about Indira Gandhi not mattering that I wanted to hear what was eliciting that reaction.
Actually, now I'm kind of organizing a committee to promote the, what can I say, creating jobs in Seoul City, persuading Seoul City government for the young people. And again, there are only 10% women in the group. So I said, unless you make it 50, because if 90% are men, there's not much creative ideas coming. Not just I'm being sexist. That I really agree with her. And on the other matter is that I happened to write a column on this female president or leadership in political arena, and we have a female president. Mm-hmm. And so in Asia, most of them are somebody's daughter
Yeah.
or wife.
Yeah.
And then,
Most of the men are also somebody's son. That's what we forget.
exactly, yeah. So, and then, when I was in Cambridge in 1988, there were people who say there's only one man in Britain. That's Margaret Thatcher, right? And probably in Korea now there's.
But as a slur in some ways, right? On Margaret Thatcher, sort of as a negative statement of sorts.
Yeah, but kind of tough person. Like in Korea, probably, I didn't want to say this, but President Park Geun-hye may be the very toughest person.
Yeah.
And at that time, I wrote an article say that I was kind of contrasting with Angela Merkel, and we won't have that type of female president, right? Not somebody's something.
Yeah.
And anyway, if we ever have women president in Korea, I said, I want her to be a daughter of mother, not the daughter of the father who has been there for 16 years as a dictator. So that's what I was going to say.
Hiroko, maybe I'll take that. I mean, this is a tough thing to say, and again, I say it we are amongst friends, and in naivety, if I say it wrongly, please excuse me, but sort of this notion with Margaret Thatcher that the definition of leadership we have as a society is a very male-defined leadership, the qualities, toughness, right? Just the notion that toughness must be a male quality itself can be, and this is not my area, but sort of, I don't know where that comes from because I can think of my mother and grandmother. But when did these qualities become male qualities? And if the criteria for success becomes becoming male-like, what does that say about society? Any thoughts from you on that or any of the other things we've talked about?
So I don't really go through this whole women's congregation in Japan because that's the role model that everybody has to just be so, toughen up. And I really think that's being a sort of a female leader, to be honest. So that's one thing. And then I was thinking a lot about what you've been talking about as sort of, so do I consider myself a woman leader? And then I use it as a way to get my intention comes across, for sure. But then I often think I consider myself as an institution. So it's kind of like I sometimes draw organizational math and say, what if Hiroko's Institute of Art, and then what kind of role I need to make sure that my intention or message come across. So I do okay, I need communication person, I need an educator. And then, so as I was doing that, it's a kind of a mind game for me to actually start thinking about what it means to actually sort of be independently, working and have a place for me to be. And that really helped. And I was talking to Kathy a lot the other day about sort of when I say I'm an artist, people are so do you draw? Or do you paint? or what do you do? I'm well, I'm an artist, and then I'm also an educator. I'm an organizer. And I have all those different sort of persona. And then one of which might be sometimes a female leader, just because I need to be that role to make sure that somehow arts and culture be protected, or at least it's just the message that I'm trying to come across, that the needs for arts and culture is defined, or just be resonated in whoever it needs to be. So I don't know, sort of, I don't care about the title, to be honest, and I wish that every single person should come up with his or her own title to define themselves. So I just kind of not sure sort of how politically it is important, but at the same time, sort of what if we accept the fact that, just remove all those things and then see how the world becomes. And if you can really go back to that point and start thinking about reimagining what's to be what it is. And then maybe there might be some really interesting hints there that we can learn from and start really using that or applying to maybe the policy or the teaching or writing, or even like the publishing system, or so academic. I don't really know, but kind of like I think in a sort of role of way of sort of how to sort of distract or intervene what's already here that might be made out of a lot of the males' perceptions of what the world should be. But there is a room for us to disrupt that at this point when we are standing on this stage in front of a lot of people. And then I really think that we should really start kind of thinking more positively about what's like to reimagine it.
And the word disruption is interesting. I'll take one last question for Lung Yingtai, and then we'll open up. But as you were saying, this disruption, it seems to me, again, I'm talking political, not other spheres, but also maybe in other spheres. If I look at Europe, the disruption seems to have happened. Right? So it's not even in the news anywhere if a female is elected prime minister or a male, it's just a name. Right? That's not a notion of commentary. If I look at Latin America, I actually see quite a lot of that. I've stopped counting how many are female or male because it again kind of becomes the norm. Certainly not so in the US yet at that level, but in many other things it is. I look at Africa, that's not there yet. I look at Asia, it's sort of struggling. Am I right, the scarf is Indonesian? The person is Indian?
The scarf is Indonesian.
Yes, batik, okay. So whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's South Asia, whether it's East Asia, whether even if it is West Asia, you now routinely find women leaders. It becomes less of a matter of commentary. And the question I had for Lung Yingtai is that does it matter that you have even a few in the way that Urvashi was talking about, that as a faculty member when you were the only one? Did it matter, not to you, but to the others? Or in the cabinet, did it matter to the others that there was a woman? And did their behavior change? Not in a superficial way, but in how they thought about problems because there was someone who could react back with a sensibility that they did not have about society.
Can I add a question to that for you? Does it matter? Can I ask whether it's exhausting sometimes?
Okay, I'll get back to that. I'm not quite sure when we talk about the issue by using the term male qualities and female qualities, because you very well could have female leaders who have absolutely no awareness of gender problems. And you could have male leaders who really are very aware of that. I think it's a matter of awareness, not whether the body organ, what you have, that matters. And so when I was minister, do you call this idea, this awareness of mine, female or male? We have 7 departments. And I will get them together, and we have huge resources at our hand. Actually, as government, what you do, you redistribute resources. We have a budget, and the budget is taxpayers' money. And we are making policies, meaning we decide how much we put in building a beautiful concert where ballet is being performed in there, or how much I would put in the library in a mountain tribe, which is totally inaccessible. That's policy making. And I would talk to my directors, and there's one example I always give them to make them aware what are your responsibilities. And the examples I give is, please imagine 2 12-year-old child, one living in the center of Taipei, a very, very, very wealthy area, where he can walk 5 minutes and there's a concert, 10 minutes you have a museum, 15 minutes you have a gallery. And then another 12-year-old child who lives in the tribe, in the mountains, by the ocean, where for him to go one way to see any performance at all, it's 3 hours mountainous walk, and another 3 hours back. There was 6 hours to see 5 minutes of performance. As government official, you have to ask yourself where you put your resources. Do you have these two children in your mind? This is the question I would ask every of my people. But am I being male or female? It's hard to say.
Just add one thing to that. So I totally hear what she's saying, but I just want to also throw other examples of what I learned from, like, so BU Medical School, if you do the blind application, what I learned is it's going to be all international Indian women. The majority is going to be female. There will be hardly any white male being admitted into the program. That's one statistic that I heard about. And then other part of the whole arts and cultural part of it, so New England Conservatory does this whole blind audition. So they play the music behind the curtain so that they can't see who they are, to diversify the sort of the look of the or makeup of the school system. So it kind of, I just wanted to throw that out, just sort of like, I totally get like the whole sentiment or X and chromosome and Y chromosome thing, and to the whole knowledge of the gender, but also like, do you think we got to that place where we don't have to worry too much about what we see, and then how we see can affect the sort of the rest of it? Or I just wanted to throw that out.
I'm going to hold that, including the question on whether it is exhausting. I'm assuming the answer is yes. And open up and maybe take a few questions. Again, our big question is, what does it mean to be a woman leader anywhere? What does it mean to be a woman leader in Asia? And what does it mean to Asia to have women leader? May I suggest we have mics that can come to you, or you can come to the mic, and I'll suggest that we'll take 2 or 3 together and then come back to the panel rather than take it one at a time. We have a question right there. And then we'll have another one at the back there.
Hi, thank you
Do
for
introduce
coming.
yourself.
Okay, my name is Sang Yu. I'm from Harvard, actually, across the river.
We won't hold that against you. Go ahead.
Yes, but I'm here to support all the initiatives supporting women movements and all the women leadership. My question is, not considering the term of leadership, when you are doing anything, I remember all of you mentioned, I want to do, and within my heart, when do you know this is a time for you to stop when you're facing all types of difficulty and trying to choose another trajectory? And when is a moment when you think you should persist? Because these days I hear everything about women leader to be adaptive in workplace situation. So that's my question. When do you know this is the way to go, and when do you know you need to be flexible?
Excellent. We'll take a couple more. I think there was someone at the back of the... Right there. Anyone here? And after that, we'll go to her.
Wait, are we not going to hear the answer to that question first?
No, we'll take few and then
Okay,
we'll come back to all of them.
Hi, my name is Leah. I'm from Tokyo. I go to a women's college, Wellesley. Hi, if anyone of you are from there. I have a question specifically for Kikuchi-san. I want to ask specifically about art. One of the most memorable quotes that I read is from Yayoi Kusama. It was an interview that she did back in like the 60s or 70s. And she said, for an art like mine, art that does battle at the border of life and death, questioning what we are and what it means to live and die, Japan was too small, too feudalistic, and too scornful of women. My art needed a more unlimited freedom and a wider world. So this was in the 70s that she said that, but it really struck out to me when I read it. I wonder if you have any of the same sentiments, and if not, I would love to know why, and how the rest of you, like the other panelists, have faced this kind of resentment or a kind of hesitation to where you're from, but wanting to go back and make it better. How do you kind of like justify that?
We'll take one more.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm from Boston University. I have a question about women leadership. So these days, people are all talking about women leadership, like how women can become a global leader in these days. And there is actually a forum tomorrow in Harvard. It's a China-Harvard forum, and it invites lots of like excellent women from business, corporation, and talk about women leadership. And I just wonder that people are emphasizing women leadership so much. Is that kind of a prejudice towards women when they talk about it? Why people are not talking about man leadership, or they're just talking about women leadership? I'm just like curious. Thank you.
I think we have 3 absolutely excellent questions. When do you say no? How do you fight the battle? And is this just a way of showing a different type of prejudice? Anyone who wants to take any of those? Urvashi?
I talk too much. Why don't you?
I don't really say no. I think it's more of continuous in my case. I always want to be on my own, and human being is not is kind of some of a relationship. I'm not isolated individual, right? So I become mother, I become teacher, I become grandmother, and I become to have so many students whom I love. That makes you change. That's what I want to answer to your question. And the third one, I think that now we all know male leadership is over. That's why we are talking about it.
That is empirically true. One of the questions was directed at you, but also the power of no.
That's awesome. No, but just kind of without being, giggly about it. I just think that, I could just quickly talk the question that I got from Leah about the reason why I came here was I left because I needed a place to escape. That's kind of like, oftentimes when you try to study abroad, you feel like you have a big dream or a big reason to do it. But I kind of believe in escaping is one big reason to move forward. And then, so that's what I did. So I didn't have a whole lot of dream to become an artist or anything. Kind of one thing led to the other, and then I'm here where I am. But so I didn't necessarily have a resistance per se of where I'm coming from, despite the fact that I just didn't quite belong there. But I knew there was some place that I could belong to. So I'm kind of like, I got to the point where when I returned after the earthquake, I'm sort of like, I pick up on this kind of angry tone from here that I try to sort of like very aggressive about, what I mean by this and that. And then I kind of like drawing myself back to be more relaxed and being different kinds of leaders. And then with that, I'm able to sort of do more. And then sort of kind of coming around to the point where, like Kusama was saying, it's like, I don't know. Do I really have a... Huh? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I just kind of thought... No. But I can talk to you more directly about it. So that would be probably better that way. And then, so I'll shut up. Yeah.
We won't let you do that.
I just want to answer that question, when do you persist and when you leave? Because I didn't finish my term, so I left. I was actually the only one in the cabinet who left after the major defeat of the ruling party. But anyway, so I decided to leave. One essential thing about getting into politics, especially in such a high-profile job, is that you have to have the ability to pretend to respect people you actually have disdain for. And there's a certain quota in me. So before I reach that limit of the quota, I persist. When that quota is reached, I leave.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd like to come in on that as well. I think it's a really important question, and you answered it so wonderfully. I mean, I would say when something is, it's a strategic decision. When something is important enough, you persist. When you think that you will do better by letting go for that moment and coming back to it in a different way and revising your strategy, I guess you give up and you find a different way of doing it. It's really a question for the specific problem that you're caught in or the specific path you're taking. But if I may, I have a question which I would like to ask to Anne. When you were talking, you said one of the reasons that women's leadership is not so, I don't know, so successful or whatever, the phrase you used was, there's no solidarity among the oppressed. Instead, they compete, and you used it to speak of women not succeeding. But I mean, so do men. So what is it that allows them to move on the path to leadership when they compete and there's no solidarity? I mean, I've not known men to have the same kind of solidarities that women do have, you know. So
no, that's a fair point. And I guess I'd just say that if the group is already on top, then them competing amongst themselves is not so damaging. Surely it's also the case that men belong to all kinds of different social groups, and sometimes they're in oppressed social groups, and we see the same phenomenon that they do sometimes bring each other down. So I certainly didn't mean to say that we never have solidarity. We often do.
They often do.
But a breakdown in that can be damaging. But thanks for the question.
And I'm thinking of, we have a sixth chair. And because I also have, I want to open up a second round, but I don't want that question that was asked back there to go unanswered. To use her phrase, parading women leaders, there can be, for many groups, a tendency to cherry pick examples that may not be actually representative of a change in society. We see that with all sorts of groups. And then to highlight those examples. Now, I can think of a positive value that you make role models by doing that. And the suggestion in the question was that maybe it can also be not just role models, but a prejudice. Am I being fair on your question? So I wanted to throw that out and not let that go undiscussed, at least. This discomfort that all of you also showed in being called women leaders, I imagine part of it is humility, but is part of it also a discomfort in being sort of singled out?
Well, I think there's no shame in admitting that there is a problem with gender. And the mere fact that the women leadership is being discussed, as you pointed out, shows that there is room to improvement. I know that Urvashi and Professor Cho, you're always sitting on all kinds of committees, right? So, and for example, our ministry organizes all kinds of committees getting opinions in. I would have to tell my colleagues that when you invite scholars to serve on the committees, can you please remind yourself and ask yourself questions, are there women on that committee? And I have to say that all the time, because the awareness is not there. And therefore, I think to talk about it, to have symposium on that, is to highlight the awareness issue.
No, I totally agree. So Japan is probably the worst among all your countries. it's like if you look at... It's just like if you look at the sort of like what she was talking about, if you just kind of fare to the intellectual level, it all turns out to be all male panels. And whether it's talking about women, it's talking about female leadership. Tomorrow I'll show you the very creepy photos of Women Leadership Forum. The banner is all men. It's like, it's the weirdest photos. And then I'm like, who?
I didn't know Japan was that much
it's
like
really, oops. But it's like, yeah, but I'll stop that. But it's sort of, I totally
I
hear.
know there are questions. I'll make this one, but I do want to raise this thing that you said, representation matters. Kathy Ye knows this. I'm on a one-man campaign to get a female on the Pakistan Supreme Court. And I've become a joke. So every 3 months, like clockwork, I write an op-ed, and then I get on Twitter, and people make fun of me. And women also don't sort of, they like my idea, and my argument is that it matters, especially in judiciary, where there are decisions, where there are perspectives that a male simply cannot have. And I don't get traction on your argument that it matters, because part of the argument is it doesn't matter if it is simply having anyone there, and we have to kind of quote unquote wait for the qualified one. And I keep arguing that plenty of qualified if you start looking.
I think it matters that the Supreme Court, you have to ask the question whether there are women in there. But the only thing I'm saying is, but we are not satisfied. We're not satisfied when a woman is there. Then we have to go on and ask if she has that awareness or not. Because simply putting a female there is first step one, but that's not enough.
I think if, again, on that question, I think there is a way in which having women on panels or discussions or discussing women's leadership and parading women out there, if you like, there is a way in which that happens. It's bound to happen. And I don't think that we should knock it, because the reverse is certainly not what we want. And I think that it's really important for women to speak out and to be represented on all sorts of bodies. When you spoke, Adil, when we started, of being the token male, we have a campaign that we started in India where on a women's website, we will post endless numbers of pictures of all male panels. And we've given them a name. They're called manels. So, and we will make a point, if you receive an invitation to an all-male, if I receive an invitation to an all-male panel, I write back and say, I'm sorry, but I'm not coming. Here is a list of women you could have included. So I think that that's really important to do. And I think if we start saying that, people are just using women and putting them up there, then we're really kind of losing the battle. And your other question, which I think is linked but not necessarily about our discomfort, let's say, with being called leaders. Well, partly that is because women are not used to leadership, so they will always kind of reject it and say, we are not leaders, we're just doing something small. We internalize the patriarchal hierarchies of what is big and what is small. And we do it also because we don't know how to own up to leadership. So I think that that's really important to recognize. But also our leaderships are not made up of individual trajectories only. I'm very aware of the fact that I would never have been able to do what I've done with my life had it not been for the support of the women's movement. And therefore, to be identified as its representative makes me slightly uncomfortable. So I think those are very good points. And again, they have relevance here in the International Studies Association, which is the academic association of at least people like me. There was this great discomfort about all male panels. And I just signed last week a pledge that we will not be on a all male panel. And so it's not simply, we didn't come up with the manels word, but we shall plagiarize. We have a second round. We'll take a question. Okay, we have someone with the microphone there, and then we'll take here. Yes.
First, it's an honor to see you
We'll
guys all here. My question is, well, many of you have said that you didn't see yourself as a leader, or you see yourself as many other things like communicator or teacher or educator, but never said anything like you have motivated yourself as a leader. But is the reason why the fact that we have so few leadership in political or economic societies, is that the reason why leadership are so few in like women. And are you guys in this with us, like encouraging young women to be leaders, or do you believe that we should make our own choices, or what kind of choices is that?
We'll again take three or
so
four
much.
questions. Yes.
Eileen Chow, Duke University. Very thoughtful panel, provocative questions, but my question is actually about failure and the lack of success and lack of leadership, because I feel like I was really inspired by what you said about not having necessarily the luxury of saying no. And I think actually what distinguishes women's leadership from entrepreneurial risk to Hillary Clinton is actually not having the privilege to fail, right? You can't screw up. You know?
Right.
So, and whereas so that's, I'm kind of more interested in hearing what you think about failure.
I'm going to shoot for diversity here and then at the back. Yes, here, yes. I think it's fine. Sure. Give it to someone. Sure. And you can get the mic to the next person then, please.
I was wondering about Lung Yingtai, Ms. Lung's comments about changes when you were a mother and a grandmother, and how would that impact your definition of family leadership? When I was invited at the very first Asian American A Voice at BU, many years ago, I was talking about helping teenagers and also teenager leadership and college students. So now I'm becoming a mom, and I try to help as many younger kids, because I realize a lot of overseas students' problems comes from early childhood. So it's kind of backwards, that as I'm getting older and becoming a mother, and I'm trying to help much younger kids to help cope with the childhood problems and also dynamics. So I would like to get your input, all of you, about family leadership and how would that impact students' overseas experience, as I'm still helping and assessing and interviewing many students coming to study in the US, and online education as well with English and mentoring online. That would be great. Thank you.
Take one more young man there.
Sorry. Oh, thank you for the chance.
You'll be the token male along with me.
Yeah, the only male. And as a male, here are so many women, and I want to ask a question about the gender difference. As you mentioned before, there are so many times about women politics, women leadership. So what do you think about the gender difference between women and men? Is it to emphasize the gender difference, and sometimes the word female is kind of positive term, and the word male politics is kind of negative word, and does this gender difference become kind of advantage of your voice? Yeah, that's my question.
Provocative thought. We've got 4 questions. Message for youth. How do you deal with failure? Role of family and those transitions in age that one goes through. And then this question, what is gender difference? Any and all of the above, any of you?
Go for it. Well, these are very difficult questions. They are big. The difference
didn't say
between
it was
men and
going
women. Okay. Let me see if I could put some things together. One question was, well, what should young women choose to do? What kind of choice? The other one is about childhood is very important. And then your question about what's the difference between men and women. I would say, to put it all together, the one message I would like to say is men need to be educated. Men need to be educated. They have become a species which are too far behind in development, meaning that we should encourage all young mothers and fathers, actually, to educate, if you have sons, to educate your sons to become improved men, emancipated male who would support their wives in the future. And childhood is important. So every woman, because, okay, male could also spend time being the father, taking care of the children as the full responsibility, but they don't have breasts. They don't breastfeed. So the women in early times, they are closer to their children simply because of breastfeeding. So both are educators, but women should consider it as a privilege that you have the opportunity to see how human beings come forth at the very beginning stage of human life. And I would encourage all the young women, it really is not that important to tell yourself whether you want to become a leader. That is a hierarchy. The more important thing is whether you should really affirm and grasp and insist on you have the opportunity to develop yourself wholly and fully. You might decide to be a full-time mother to educate your daughters and sons, which is fine. I used to be a leader at home. I led my 2 sons and a rabbit and a hamster. And I was very happy with that role as well. And that is a very important role in our society. And if you are of a different kind, you want to go into society, go into politics, and go into the arts, you just fully develop yourself. That's the most important thing, rather than asking if I want to be the leader, which is not that important. And altogether is the childhood. Yes, that's very important. Do not look down upon motherhood or fatherhood because you are being an educator. And the difference between men and women, men need to be educated. And this question you should ask, I would encourage you to ask a lot of people in order to get a question. I think you should read some books on feminism. And there are answers in there. Really do that. Okay.
And I'm very thankful for the statement also, especially on the role of leadership in society is not just the hierarchical, the mother, right? And it's a very profound role in society that cannot be undermined, and we very often do. But any of the above, not all of them, but any of the questions that struck your interest.
The first question, that maybe we didn't encourage girls to be leader enough, so that we may not have that much leader, but I don't quite agree with that. Nowadays, young people tend to try to get into the kind of try to be formal leaders. But I feel if you want to be a leader, it's more like you should be you become influential person. In order to be influential person, you should be of yourself. So the problem is that it's getting so difficult to be yourself. Of course, this is a very difficult question. So these days, from high school, I got invitation from the high school to give a lecture on feminism. So I was so surprised why they want to be interested in feminism, and later on I found that they all saw the YouTube of Emma Watson's speech, and they really want to be the leader, and they have some kind of really fixed idea of leader, which is very dangerous to me. And most of those girls who invited me were somebody's granddaughters. It was really elite school, so I thought, oh my God, this is not what really we wanted. And the second one about failure, I think this is the most crucial one. And I or you probably could do anything because we had a backup.
Yeah.
So after all, to me, feminism or whatever we should do is how to make the backup. Now people are failing all the time. Now we live in that kind of screwed up system, right? So actually, I am now kind of promoting the system of basic income. That's the only way we can solve problem. So how to make the backup so that people feel that they wouldn't die, whatever they do. Because we have enough money, but somehow we don't think that. And thirdly, about family, probably that's the difference of men and women. Nancy Chadoro has been talking about this family structure and feminine personality is with the term positional identification and relational identification. So women tend to develop kind of relationship or group through relations, not positional identity. You know, you want to be leader, that kind of image. You learn through the relationship. So when I was single, I have different type of questions, right? When I become grandmother, I really worry about this 4-year-old boy, or what kind of life he will live, which is very precarious and scary, right? So that's the third question, and or what's the fourth one? Maybe you answer.
Yes.
I guess sort of like, I won't talk about the motherhood because I've never been one, but I have a lot of youth that I worked with, so I know what it means to actually nurture, and then, but I'll leave it that. But also like, for the leadership, I guess the question is sort of, you know, is this about like, are we kind of brainwashed then of the definition of what the leadership is? And then sort of like, I always kind of think about sort of, you know, why do we say Mother Earth? It's almost like, you know, we're not like, you know, that Mother Heaven, but it's sort of like, there is a sort of a actual physical sort of difference between like, I feel like we're the sort of the earth that are kind of like grassrootsly really, you know, nurturing something out. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about something that leading, you know, with something. But I think there's different forms of leadership, and that could be followership. I don't know. We can just kind of, that's a whole another probably topic. But that's something that I've been thinking a lot about. So that can we actually be very sneaky about getting, the, you know, things come across, you know? We can just kind of say, can we do it? So you can use a very much of femininity to just, you know, convince something that men probably can't come across. I don't really know. But
also, you give a title to yourself. I think that's very important.
Right.
You know, the world we know, the formal institution, is really a very small world. There is a huge world that you can make, and that's the area we have to really move into.
Right.
So you just create yourself, and actually, this kind of world is really make you useless now, right? Because there are so many of this technocracy and global capitalism or whatever, market society really make you useless, make so many people useless. You have nothing to do. So we have to make ourselves useful to each other, and you give a name as you are doing.
Right, because it's, exactly, because it's like, now we get to the world where there's so many ways to work and make yourself, you know, earn money or make living out of whatever you want to do. And there has to be many ways to describe what you do in a way that culturally makes sense. And also, it might be different from here and there. And that might be talking about the same thing. But, you know, in the end, what matters is that you're actually doing something, you know.
Urvashi, any of the questions you want to take?
Yeah. No, it's fine. They've answered.
I know there are lots of questions, and I feel bad about it, but I should say, this is the beginning of a conversation. So we are going to continue it in a few minutes outside, and please talk to our speakers, but also to yourself. But more than that, the purpose of today is really to set the stage for tomorrow, when we have in-depth sessions with each of our speakers, and this is to sort of urge you to continue this conversation in all of those ways. But before I do thank everyone who needs to be thanked, I wanted to be unfair, to show that I'm a man, so I have to do something stupid to demonstrate the fact. And so indulge me in that. Indulge me in that. So I want to ask a question and request a short answer from each one of you, and we'll go down. And the question is two parts. A, if you look back, let's say 20 years, do you think that your societies, our societies in Asia have been led to a better place for women? And to what extent? And B, if Kathy A. or Eugenia or others were to do this panel again in 20 years, where do you think you would see your societies? Would this conversation today be even relevant? Or do you see the problem being solved or not? I know it's an unfair question, but as a provocative thought to go with, what do you see when you look back, and what do you see when you look ahead? Urvashi.
I'll start with Taiwan.
Okay.
Compared with 20 years ago, Taiwan has gone a long way. Good improvement. 20 years ago, well, I was married to a Westerner. My children, because I'm a mother, my children were not allowed to have our nationality because nationality goes with the father. And now it's not anymore. And now the Taiwanese children can choose their last name, be the mother's last name or the father's last name. So a lot of improvement has occurred in Taiwan. And 20 years ahead of us, I would think Taiwan would continue to improve if there's no war across the strait. There is one thing that I openly say that makes me very ashamed of Taiwan, that is, we still have, in Taiwan, adultery is a crime. And it usually penalizes women. I have been urging that this law has to be changed. And 20 years now, I hope it's not going to take 20 years to abolish this.
Thank you. You okay? What do you see back and what do you see ahead of you?
So 20 years ago, I was here. I got here for school. So I was 19, no, actually, I'm older than that. So maybe, oops. So maybe I have been here. But so I can't really speak on behalf of what was over there, except that I had an option to be here. Because for my mom, she really wanted to be here, but she didn't have an option. So that's 20 years ago. And then right now, just kind of jump up, just take what she said. It's like in Japan, we just had a huge battle about whether when you're married, you have to change your last name. And we lost it. It's incredible. So it's like, if I were to marry to somebody, change my last name legally, I have to change my passport. I have to change the social security number type of things. It just, your identity gets lost as soon as you're married to.
Later, you think it'll be still the same, or?
Well, I'm afraid
that. Is that the 20-year goal?
Well, I feel like I'm not a very pessimistic person, but we might be still battling it. Yeah.
20 years ago, there was a really active feminist movement by young people. There was kind of gender identity politics was really high. And now those very bright young women do not have kids, do not get married. So we have a really low birth rate, 1.17 or something.
But Japan is lower.
I guess Korea is lowest.
The lowest?
Yeah. Anyway, and they are migrating to Germany, many of them. So 20 years later, I don't know who will be the president of this country. Maybe has a lot to do with the future.
20 years.
Anyway, so. That will be about women. I rather worry about the whole humanity.
Well, you know that it's an unfair question
Sure,
that you
sure.
put to all of us.
I
But
specialize in them.
and this morning I was reading a book about race relations in the United States, and it was interesting to see how recent the change is. We tend to forget because the change is in many ways so radical and not necessarily as deep as we expect it to be, but it's so recent. So 20 years ago, if I look back, what do I see? I see what I have always kind of apprehended or known, which is that change is never linear, certainly not in our societies. And for women, it is always one step forward, two steps back. So it's a kind of zigzag pattern, but that change has happened. There is no denying. And in however small and limited a way, it has happened. But in a country like mine, in a country like yours, where things are so deeply hierarchized and where the cultural and religious baggage is so profoundly rooted, the kind of radical change that we might seek is going to take a long time to come. 20 years hence, certainly I will not be around, but if we have a similar kind of, if Kathy organizes a similar kind of dialogue here, and if sitting in our places can be poor women from our countries who have made it to the leadership positions, then I'll think the change has really happened.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We might have solved the mystery of the black. I was hoping for more optimism and hope from you on that. But if I can throw my 2 cents, if you allow me, I look back and I see we have traveled far, but not far enough. And maybe not as far as we thought we would have traveled the last 20 years, but I look ahead and I hope that people seeing that video being recorded would say, what the hell were they talking about? And they would have no idea what women leaders mean conceptually, though it would mean empirically. Now, I may turn out to be wrong, and probably I will turn out to be wrong, but that ain't going to stop me trying. Thank you all for being here.